Today you join me here on the Middle Lake at Gold Valley. In this lake there's a massive head of F1s and small carp, and I can't think of anywhere better to come and show you how I use the Advantage Baits F1 ground bait. It's a ground bait that I've had some brilliant success on, caught some big weights in matches, and I'm going to show you today how I put those match winning weights together. When we talk about F1 fishing, obviously pellets is the #1 bait. Yes, other baits do come into it when that temperature drops, but F1s love pellets, and that's why in the Advantage Baits F1 ground bait there is a large percentage of crushed pellets. It's an ingredient that I've used in other ground baits to catch big weights of F1s in the past, and when we were coming up with the F1 it was an ingredient that just had to be in there. It not only catches you lots of fish, but it holds fish in your peg, and you just see the difference when you've got these crushed pellets in your bait, how many fish are in your peg. It's a fantastic bait, and I've used it not only to win big matches in the summer, but also to win winter leagues with F1s, so it's perfectly adapted in that colder weather. It's very easy to prepare, and I'm going to show you exactly how to do that now. Very important, even in this hot weather, to mix it up well in advance of when you start fishing, when you first get to your peg. Quite often in those colder months I will mix it up the night before at home, just knowing that in that temperature it's not going to go off, but this time of year, as soon as you get to your peg. For today's session, because I'm going to be fishing in the margins and then out to the island, I'm going to mix up a whole bag. It is a ground bait that the fish, you know, when they get a taste for it, they'll just keep coming back. It's got that real fine ground pellet in that will create that little bit of a cloud, and that lingering cloud is what's going to keep them in your peg. With all the ground baits that I prepare, always mix them to begin with on the wet side. Going a little bit careful with the water, just to make sure you don't really over wet it. You don't want it like total slop. But what this ground bait will do is absorb a lot of water. So the first mix, always make sure it's really on the damp side. And I want to give myself a good 50 minutes to an hour to let this ground bait absorb plenty of water. I will dampen it down again. And a real good test with the ground bait, you can see now, very easy to use, user friendly. But if you get it and you can just squeeze it so that it comes out through your fingers and the palm of your hand, you know it's dead right. I'm just going to leave that now, prepare the other baits. I'm going to do a few expanders and a few micro pellets for today's session. But now that's perfect. I can leave that for about an hour, come back to it, fluff it up, and you'll see just how easy it is to prepare. I don't need to riddle it. There's nothing else I need to do. When I come back to this, I might add a tiny bit of water, just fluff it up, and we'll be good to go. So there we are, the gear's all ready to go. I've plumbed up, and I've even got the expander pellets and a few micros ready just to mix in, and obviously for the hook. Just about to start, and the last thing I'm going to do is just give the ground bait the final once over. Like I say, it's absorbed all that water, and you can see now, even without riddling, the consistency of the ground bait is absolutely perfect. One little tip on these hot days, or even those days where it's pouring down with rain, keep your ground bait covered. I've just got a little bowl here where I'm going to put enough in just to put on my side tray, just to get the session started, and then I can keep the bowl full of ground bait behind me and just go in it as and when I need it. Very important to keep it out the rain, or on these real hot days out of that sun, because it will affect your mix and dry it out. So that's the ground bait ready. I think you can see just how easy it is to prepare. Now I'm going to show you just how effective it is to use. So we're all ready to start fishing now. And what I've done, I've made a little mix up, which is 2/3 ground bait and 1/3 micro pellets, which is the way that I like to start feeding. The F1 ground bait is really nice when mixed with micros, which obviously, again, is a #1 bait for these F1s and small carp. It's important that your ground bait, you know, feels right with micro pellets. I've got obviously a mix of just neat ground bait and a mix of, like I say, 2/3 ground bait and 1/3 micros, and that's the mix I'm going to start with. I've plumbed up in real shallow water, around about 18 inches touching the bank. Obviously here at Gold Valley and Middle Lake, I do know the pegs very well, and I know the little spots where you catch plenty of fish. And just down to the left, on about 4.5 sections of pole, is a fantastic area. You can get in that depth, and using that ground bait and using the cloud of the ground bait, you can not only draw fish in there, but you can tend to get bites on and off all day. In front of me, at about 1 o'clock, we've got a sunken island, and again it's about 16 to 18 inches deep on top of that. I'm not going to feed it to begin with. A lot of my F1 fishing, unless I'm trying to catch shallow, I won't feed the area of my swim until I'm actually going to fish it. A lot of matches, when you're looking for these big weights of these smaller F1s like we've got here, you're looking at catching them close to yourself, feeding really regular with a small pole cup and trying to keep those bites coming. I really can't wait to start. I've shown you the mixes. I'm going to start on a single expander pellet in the edge and just potting in those little blobs of ground bait with a few micros in. I know it will bring fish in and we'll get some bites, and like I say, quite often in matches you can catch for 5 hours close just by using these little bits of ground bait. I did mix up 1 kilo, and when you're catching in excess of 100 fish in a 5-hour match, you will get through it, so always be prepared. The last thing you want to be doing is getting up halfway through a match to prepare more bait. It's always worth preparing 1 kilo. That way you can concentrate on the feeding. Also, what you don't want to do when you get these fish feeding and you get the regularity of the feed, that's what's keeping them in the area, how regular you feed. And if you're catching one, you go back in, tap a little ball in, catch another one. It's that regularity, and once you've created that, you don't want to stop, because any little glitch or little stop in that, obviously the fish will just go and your catch rate will fall. A lot of F1 matches are very close, and you need to be catching for the full 5 hours. So there we go, there's an odd fish there. Again, another little tiny blob of the ground bait just potted in. Just lift the float, you can see that little bit of a cloud there, and drop the float right on top of it. Getting quite a few indications. It's just about lifting and dropping when you get those indications. Plenty of indications. They're coming straight to that little nugget of bait. Amazing how many fish you just get in your peg and that stay in your peg. If you can keep getting, there's another fish there. If you can just keep those fish in your peg, you're going to end up with a weight of fish. One thing is, when you're fishing like this in the margins for these F1s, you're going to get a lot of bites. See that one then? I'd literally just tap that ground bait in, and that's exactly what I'm talking about, the regularity of feed. You keep that bait going in on a real regular basis, you're going to end up with a lot of fish in your peg. And like I say, catching over 150 fish in 5 hours is no problem. Fast and efficient and accurate and regular feeding, and you're going to catch a lot of fish. One thing I do tend to do when you get a lot of fish in your peg as well is I won't feed every single cast. Say for instance now, you know, there seems to be quite a few fish there and you can quite often get away with feeding every other cast. But the one thing I won't do is, you know, if those indications slow down a little bit, I'll certainly start feeding every cast again. One little tip, this little area here, keep it nice and clear of your nets. Keep your nets over to your right and this little area here clear. That way, when you're using a kinder pot and you're dropping your rig in the edge, you're not going to get caught up. There's nothing worse than hooking your net or hooking a bramble. Make sure it's all clear. That way, you'll be faster, more efficient and catch these fish very, very quickly. There we go, there's another one. Fishing in close. I think it goes without doubt to show just how well we're catching in close. I think it's time to go out where I plumbed up earlier on that sunken island and let's have a go at distance and see if we can start catching out there just the same. That was a real quick bite. So that's another lovely F1. Plenty of indications, they're coming straight to that. That one took it immediately. Looks like a little carp. And it really is a fish every chuck. Another decent sized F1. Coming off the long pole now, that easterly wind's really picked up. Not only that, the sun's right in our view now, making it very, very hard to see the float. On that long line, we've caught a fish virtually every chuck on a banded hard 4mm. The same mix, 2/3 groundbait, 1/3 micros. It just keeps fish in your peg. And I also think, although it's only 16 inches deep out there, you would have caught them half depth. There was an odd one swirling. But what's amazing is we've hardly lost a fish today. And I think that's testimony to the fish being happy and feeding correctly in your peg. One little tip, like I did in the edge, don't always fish right where you put the ground bait in. Fish out a little bit into the deeper water so your hook bait is just off bottom. When you're on these venues where there's a lot of fish, that can be an absolutely deadly way of catching these fish. They come to the cloud, they're in your peg, and your hook bait's suspended just off bottom into the deeper water. As far as the long line's concerned, again, fish every chuck. And I think that being that bit further away, we fished 14.5 metres, being a bit further away from you, they felt really at home, safe and secure, and they've really felt aggressive. So all in all, a fantastic day, showing you how I use the Advantage Baits F1. Let's have a little look at a few of the fish we managed to catch today.